So as you see here, this subject, metal cutting and machine tools, introduced to you as per the JNTU curriculum in third year, first semester. So this is also another manufacturing technique. Now let us see what is actually MCMT involves. So manufacturing, before discussing about the metal cutting process, first let us discuss what is meant by manufacturing. Already we have discussed in the second year, first semester also. Manufacturing process are classified into two categories: primary manufacturing process and secondary manufacturing process. So let us discuss these manufacturing process briefly, and then we will switch over to the metal cutting process. So manufacturing is the word derived from a word of Latin, manufactus. That means a component made by hand, Now here, earlier days, of course, most of the components are made by hand. But today, with the help of the tools, machinery, advanced computerized technology, the manufacturing scenario or manufacturing technology has been changed. So that is why you have a separate engineering in mechanical engineering called as manufacturing engineering. Actually, manufacturing is another word used in place of production technology. So manufacturing engineering or manufacturing process involves various steps through which raw materials are transformed into a final product. Production also we have defined like that is. But in today's modern context, it involves using raw material, converting into final product, various hand tools, machinery, even computers. Therefore, this manufacturing engineering is a study of the process required to make parts and assemble them in machines. So this manufacturing is the backbone of any industrialized nation. If you see, even the domestic components, what are the products we use in our home household purpose, like utensils, right from the plastic buckets and other household tools, agricultural components like plough, tractor components, and industrial components, mill housings, rice mill components, sugar mill components, industrial machines like cranes, trucks, automobile components, aerospace components, navigation components, ship bodies. All these are produced by under the umbrella of manufacturing technology. So therefore, manufacturing is the backbone of any developed nation or industrialized nation. The future engineers like you definitely must know the basic requirements of these activities, where the product is produced by the help of man, machine, material, methods, and money, etc., to finally making a finished product of any manufacturing organization. Now this technology, that is manufacturing technology, demonstrates using various hand tools, equipments, machinery, methods of manufacturing that facilitate shaping or forming the existing raw materials into suitable forms. This manufacturing technology also provides the basic knowledge, as already you know, various workshop process like bench working, fitting in your first year, sheet metal process, carpentry, pattern making, mold making, foundry, smithy and forging, metal working, heat treatment, welding, fastening, machine shop, surface finishing process, coatings and assembly, inspection and quality control. As you see in this diagram, so a manufacturing process that converts the raw material or semi-finished products into a final products with the help of men, a method, a machinery, etc. And these men, method, machinery, material are not available freely, they are obtained with some money. So with the help of these 5 M's, man, method, machinery, material, and money, you will convert the basic material, raw material, into a finished product, final product, just like wood is converted into a bench or a table by using some process like carpentry. So that process is known as a manufacturing process. So another example, if you say, if you want to make a gas pipeline, as you already know, a gas pipeline of a few kilometers cannot be produced by a single step manufacturing process. So you produce initially a 100 meters pipe, and these 100 meters of pipes, many in number, using some basic manufacturing process like metal casting, etc. And you join all these individual gas pipes of 100 meters to produce a lengthy pipe of few kilometers using another process you already know, welding process. So that is an assembly process. So a manufacturing process can be a basic manufacturing process like casting, assembly process like welding, rivets using bolts and nuts, other metal forming process like forging, extrusion, rolling, and even powder metallurgy processes, and plastics materials also, etc. As you see here, the starting material of this shape of certain amount of worth is converted into a final finished product of particular shape of higher value using some process like you are melting this raw material in a furnace and pouring the liquid metal in a mold to produce a finished product. So this is known as manufacturing process. Here it is casting. Similarly, other process. So this is basics about these are the basics about the manufacturing process. We'll discuss how manufacturing process are classified into later. Now come to the present semester topic, that is metal cutting and machine tools, MCMT. Now what is actually metal cutting? As you know, metal cutting, you are cutting the metal. So metal cutting process not only involves removing the metal from the materials, it also involves removal of the material like plastics, composites, ceramics, and other materials also. So therefore, metal cutting is also called as material removal processes. Now it is one of the manufacturing process similar to other manufacturing process like casting, welding, forging, extrusion, and other forming process. With the help of forging and casting process, we can manufacture parts of different shapes and sizes. Parts can be the rods, tubes, sheet metal, and others. But parts manufactured by all these processes may have poor geometry and size control, and other limitations like good surface finish may not be obtained by this process. Therefore, another manufacturing method apart from this, which provides good surface finish, good quality, good geometry, is nothing but the metal cutting process. Hence, in almost all these cases, the castings, forgings produced by this process, they will undergo a machining process called as metal cutting process, where these components are assembled with the parts to complete the final component. So in machining, alternate name to metal cutting is machining or machining technology or material removal process. We will use a machine generally called as a machine tool that houses the raw material, that holds the raw material to make it into the final shape. So machine tool is a machine that houses the raw material to convert it into final shape by reducing or removing the unwanted material. So this machine tool can be a lathe machine, shaper, planer, a drilling machine, a slotting machine, etc. So a machine tool and another cutting tool, just like if you want to make the apple into slices, apple is the raw material, knife or sharp cutting edge is the cutting tool. So here also in cutting a metal, you have one machine tool that houses the workpiece material and a sharp cutting edge called as cutting tool. These two are used. So a cutting tool made of much harder material. If you want to cut the apple, it cannot be cut by another soft material. So you need a knife or another sharp cutting edge whose hardness is more than the hardness of the apple and also must be sharp. Then only it can cut the apple. Similarly, you need a cutting tool whose hardness is more than the material being cut. Suppose you want to reduce a mild steel workpiece of some 50 mm diameter to 40 mm diameter. You cannot cut this mild steel with another soft material whose hardness is lesser than this, like copper and other things. It is not possible. You have to use a harder material like diamond and high-speed steel containing steel with some other alloying elements like vanadium, chromium, and tungsten and others. Then this mild steel can be cut. Thus, the material removed from this part, the workpiece, is obtained because of the relative motion between the machine tool and the cutting tool. Because metals cannot be easily cut just like the wood on a plane or other machine, or any wood turning lathe machine, or an apple by a simple knife, because metals are very harder to cut. Therefore, you should provide a relative motion between the machine tool and the cutting tool, and also cutting tool should have sufficient hardness than the workpiece material. So that cutting tool is given sharp cutting edge and it is forced to penetrate inside the workpiece surface to a small amount of depth. As you see in this diagram, how the metal cutting process takes place. As you see, this is the workpiece. Say a cylindrical workpiece of diameter D1. Say it is diameter D1 is say 50 mm. We want to reduce its diameter to say 40 mm D2. Now this, let us say this material is mild steel. Diameter D1 can be reduced to D2 by providing relative motion between this workpiece and another sharp cutting edge called as a tool. Here it is known as turning tool or a single point cutting tool, whose hardness is more than the workpiece material. If this is mild steel, this can be high speed steel, a steel material with alloying elements like tungsten, chromium. So the hardness of this tool is more than the workpiece. And just not only the hardness, and you should provide some relative motion. Because of friction and relative motion, the material from the workpiece is removed. So therefore, workpiece is rotated at very high RPM. By keeping this workpiece in a machine, generally called as a machine tool or lathe machine, in a check, and this is rotated, and you move the cutting tool by pressing against the rotating workpiece. So because of the relative motion and a high hardness, the workpiece material is removed in the form of small segments called as chip. So therefore, you are reducing the diameter. If you want to reduce the entire diameter of the workpiece, you have to move the cutting tool in this direction along the length of the workpiece. So this is known as feed direction. And further reducing the diameter of the workpiece is further possible by moving the cutting tool into further depth known as depth of cut. Final diameter can be obtained by moving many number of passes of this tool into workpiece. This is how you will produce a small diameter workpiece from a bigger diameter by a process known as turning. This is the basic metal cutting operation provided on a machine tool known as lathe machine. Similarly, other metal cutting operation known as parting. So you are making the cylindrical component into two parts. So you are making a groove using a tool known as grooving tool or parting tool. Similar process. This is put inside a lathe machine and is made to rotate with high RPM. You are using a grooving tool of this particular shape. Based on the shape of the tip of the tool, you are producing the groove. It is having certain applications, this grooved component. Thus, you are able to remove the material from the workpiece or the metal or the composite material or any plastic component by keeping this workpiece in a machine tool. Of course, machine tool can also houses the tool, cutting tool. Cutting tool cuts the workpiece material. By providing relative motion between these two, you will remove the material from the workpiece. This is the basic mechanism of metal cutting process. We'll discuss further about this metal cutting process and mechanism and all these things in the next class for this. This is basic introduction to metal cutting. So similarly, you can also produce the threads on a board by using similar process, relative motion between the workpiece and the cutting tool. You can also make a hole by putting a drill bit inside a workpiece. Thus, the relative motion between the tool and workpiece results in this strip of material being sheared off. Material is cut or sheared from the workpiece, reducing its thickness or diameter. So this process is repeated several times before the entire surface of the workpiece can be curved and reduced in depth. The thin strip of the material sheared from the workpiece is called chip. So it must be understood that chips are produced by shearing action and not by simple cutting. So the power is required for machining. This is provided by the machine tool. In some cases of the machining, the relative motion can be obtained by keeping the workpiece stationary or tool moving, or tool may be stationary or workpiece is moving, or both of them may be moving. So you have to provide some relative motion between these two such that the workpiece material is removed. Now, as already discussed that the cutting tool materials are made by very high hardened material because they have to withstand very high temperatures of about 650 to 700 degrees centigrade. So the property of this cutting tool which can withstand its high hardness at this temperature is known as red hardness. Therefore, the cutting tools are made by high-speed steel or tungsten carbide or aluminum or other silicon carbide composites. So this is about the simple introduction to machining or metal cutting process. Now come back to again the overall prospectus or scope of the manufacturing process, because under which category this machining or metal cutting technology comes. All manufacturing process we discussed in the second year comes under these categories: shaping, joining, finishing process. Shaping process involves casting, rolling, forging, drawing, sintering, sheet metal processing, machining, etc. Joining process like welding, adhesives, gluing, rivets, bolts, etc. Finishing process, secondary process like heat treatment, enabling, electroplating, grinding, etc. This is basic classification of all manufacturing process. So again, the manufacturing process are also classified into two categories. You already discussed in second year: primary manufacturing process and secondary manufacturing process. Now, what are these primary manufacturing process? These are the manufacturing process that converts raw material into semi-finished products or even finished products, but in a single step. They may not need further processing as a final consumption. So some process maybe produces finished products or articles into useful form, whereas others may not produce final products. And these semi-finished products can be finished by other secondary manufacturing process like machining or welding. Now you see, you have discussed that gas pipeline cannot be produced by entire casting. The entire gas pipeline cannot be produced by casting process. So individual gas pipes are produced by casting, and the entire gas pipeline is obtained by welding process. So gas pipes are by casting, gas pipeline is by welding. So welding is secondary manufacturing process. So thus casting needs remelting of the scrap and defective ingots in furnaces like cupola, other electric furnaces, and pouring the liquid metal in a mold cavity and allowing it to solidify to room temperature. You know about the casting process. Thus intricate shapes which can be complicated geometry, they can be produced by casting, and they can be include machine beds, automobile engines, carburetors, flywheels, etc. Some of these primary shaping process or manufacturing process are casting, powder metallurgy, plastics technology, gas cutting, bending, and forging. Now come to secondary machining process. As very large number of components required further processing, all the components cannot be put for final consumption produced by forging, rolling, extrusion, and by casting. They need further finishing, further assembling. They are called as secondary machining process. Such as secondary process or machining process are metal cutting process or welding, etc. So this process of removing undesired or unwanted material from the workpiece is known as metal cutting or machining process. So already you have discussed about this machining process. Some of the machine tools: lathe, milling machine, drilling, shaper, planer, slaughter, etc. And you can produce the rod shapes items, bars, and flat surfaces. So therefore, the components produced by machining will have good dimensional accuracy, good surface finish, etc. This is one of the limitations in the primary manufacturing process, and it is fulfilled by secondary manufacturing process. So some of the machining process produces the components or machine tool instruments, automobile parts, nuts, bolts, gears, etc. And here you can see some of the machining process or secondary manufacturing process, turning process, threading, knurling. These are 3 are on the lathe machine. Milling process to produce flat surfaces, drilling process to make the holes, boring for producing enlarged holes, planing process to produce very large flat surfaces, shaping process to produce very small flat surfaces, slotting to produce keyholes and holes, sawing process, broaching and hobbing and other gear making process, finishing process like grinding and thread cutting, and some advanced and unconventional machining process like electric discharge machining, electrochemical machining, water jet machining, abrasive jet machining, and using the computers called as CNC, computer numerical control machining, and numerical control machines. So these are about the secondary and primary manufacturing process. Therefore, your machining process or metal cutting comes under secondary manufacturing or secondary materials manufacturing processes. The secondary processes are mainly required for achieving dimensional accuracy, high degree surface finish. Now, briefly, machining is not only indicating removal of the metal from the materials, but can be used for wood, plastic, ceramics, and composite to reduce their sizes and shapes. A person whose specialization in machining is called as a machinist. The worker who is involved in removing the material from these is called as a machinist. A room or building or a company where this machining is done is called as a machine shop. In our laboratory, in our workshop, we have a machine shop. Just like a foundry shop, you have a machine shop. And you have a computer numerical control where today modeling machining is done with the help of these computers. So the increased efficiency of the CNC makes all these things. Now we'll see some of the applications of this machining in the next class in detail. So what are the components made in automobile parts, agricultural parts, aerospace components, aircraft components, defense, navigation, ship parts, exclusively used for exclusively fabricated, exclusively produced by metal cutting process in the next class. So the metal cutting process is simply the producing the workpiece by removing unwanted material from a block of material in the form of chips. This is adapted because of these exclusive reasons: to get higher surface finish, to achieve close tolerance, to get complex geometric shapes. Sometimes it may be economical to produce a component by machining process.